On ordinary mornings, I edited other people's mistakes before I had breakfast. It was a useful order of events when a documentary producer sent me a transcript that turned a factory whistle into a distant bird, or a court interpreter's cough into unidentified noise. I could sit at the narrow table beneath my kitchen window, fix the timing, add the missing captions, and feel for 10 minutes that the world became a little less careless because I had been awake. My name is Yang Ji-won. I was 29 and Omega and a freelance accessibility editor in Seoul, which sounded nobler than it felt at 4 in the morning with convenience store coffee beside my laptop and a stack of unpaid invoices pinned under a cracked mug. I wrote subtitles for independent films, added audio description to educational videos, repaired the clumsy transcripts companies wanted to pass off as inclusion, and, when work was thin, translated interviews for a small disability rights archive in Mapo. The work suited me. I liked paying attention to what most people skipped: a hesitation before an answer, a hand reaching for the edge of a chair, the difference between someone leaving a room and someone escaping it. The apartment I rented was small enough that I could unplug the kettle from bed if I stretched, but I had made it mine with stubborn thrift. 2 basil pots struggled by the window. A second-hand standing lamp leaned like it had a private grief. My shelves held captioning manuals, old film festival catalogs, a ceramic rabbit my younger brother had made in middle school, and one locked black box I never opened in the morning because morning was for practical lies. Rent would be paid. My mother's rehab bill would be negotiated down. My brother Do-hyun would not notice how often I skipped proper meals. The man whose cufflink rested in that locked box was not a wound if I kept him inside it. At 6, my phone buzzed with a message from my sister. Sarah never wrote greetings unless she wanted money or intended to apologize. "Can you come by before noon?" The landlord came again. I stared at the message until the screen dimmed. Sarah was not my sister by blood. She was my mother's niece, the cousin who had slept on the floor beside me through the year after my father vanished, and who had threatened 3 debt collectors with a frying pan when we were 17. In our family, affection usually arrived carrying a weapon or a bill. She ran a 2-person legal translation office near Jongno and pretended it was growing because she owned a printer large enough to jam in 3 languages. Her landlord had been patient during the first year. Patience ended when rent rose. I typed, "I have a deadline until 10. I'll bring the bank book." Her reply came at once. "Don't bring the bank book. Bring your brain. Also bread." That meant trouble of the kind she did not want to name over text. I washed my face with cold water, made rice with an egg, packed half for Do-hyun, and changed into a clean shirt that had survived enough laundry to become soft at the collar. Before leaving, I opened the locked box, though I had promised myself not to. Inside lay a pair of silver cufflinks, a card from a private club, and a folded note written in a hand that made every sentence look like a legal threat. "Wait for me at the west entrance. I will be late by 7 minutes. Do not take the main road." Jin Tae-hwan wrote affection as if it had to pass through security first. 3 months earlier, I would have laughed at the note. 2 months earlier, I would have touched the ink with foolish fondness. That morning, I closed the box and pressed the key into the pocket sewn inside my bag, where it knocked gently against my transportation card all the way down the stairs. I met Jin Tae-hwan during a charity screening for injured workers. I had been hired to manage live captions because the original service failed at the last minute. The event was sponsored by Seogang Meridian Group, a logistics and construction company with clean brochures, complicated money, and a CEO whose name made rooms change temperature. Jin Tae-hwan was 34, an alpha, and the only man I knew who could stand perfectly still while everyone else rearranged themselves around him. His family owned shipping yards, hotels, nightclubs, and other businesses people described in careful nouns. My friend Min Seok, who fact-checked crime documentaries, once told me the Jin family had survived 5 administrations, 3 investigations, and 1 internal war by learning which doors opened into courtrooms and which opened into the river. Tae-hwan had not spoken to me during the screening, except to ask whether the captions could include speaker identification for a panelist with a soft voice. I said yes. He watched me adjust the feed, then said, "You don't guess when you can verify." I said, "Guessing is for weather reports and men who say they'll call." He looked at me for 1 quiet second, then returned to his seat. After the event, one of his assistants brought me a sealed envelope with double my fee and a business card. I returned the extra cash and kept the card because I had principles in public and curiosity in private. 2 weeks later, he called about another event. By the 4th call, the work had become a meal at a restaurant with private rooms. By the 7th, he had asked whether I hated being touched or only hated being handled. I told him the answer depended on whether the person asking intended to learn the difference. He learned. That was the problem. Tae-hwan never asked me to be his secret. He simply lived in a world where open affection created leverage. He said the people around him watched for patterns, then punished whatever softened him. I said I had no interest in becoming a soft object in a hard family. He said, "Then don't." I stayed anyway because intelligence did not make me immune to tenderness offered with restraint. He never arrived without warning. He never entered my apartment unless I opened the door. He remembered that I disliked being photographed from the left because a childhood accident had left a faint scar near my ear. He listened to my complaints about bad subtitles as if they were board reports. He slept lightly, one hand near his phone, and once, when thunder woke me before dawn, he rose without comment to close the windows and make tea. I told myself a hidden relationship could still be dignified if both people respected the door. I was not entirely wrong. That made the wrong parts harder to forgive. Sarah's office smelled of toner, dust, and the walnut cookies she bought when she wanted to seem calm. Her assistant, a college student named Jin, sat behind the front desk with eyes red from crying and a plastic folder clutched against her chest. "Bread," I said, holding up the bag. Sarah took it, kissed my cheek, and said, "My favorite brother. I am your only legally deniable brother. Don't joke, I'm angry." "With me?" "With a system. You're near enough." She pulled me into the back room. Her desk had disappeared beneath contracts and translation drafts. On top sat a loan notice stamped with my father's name. The amount made my stomach go cold before my mind finished reading it. "He's dead," I said. "He is missing," Sarah corrected. "Legally, that makes everyone more creative." My father had left 10 years earlier with a suitcase, a forged investment scheme, and the last of my mother's savings. His body had never been found. Debt collectors preferred that. Death created paperwork. Absence created fear. Sarah tapped the notice. This creditor bought old claims from the private lenders who funded his construction scam. They're saying your mother co-signed a guarantee. She never signed anything after the stroke. The date is from before. The signature is close enough to scare a clerk. Close enough is not legal. Close enough is expensive. Sarah rubbed both hands over her face. They also contacted my landlord, suggested my office may be used to hide family assets. Jin's mother saw 2 men outside her school. My first instinct was to say, I would handle it. That is what eldest sons in damaged families say, even when they have no handle to hold. Instead, I sat in the client chair and made myself read every page. The creditor was a shell company tied to Deo Holdings. Deo Holdings had appeared in 3 documentary projects I had captioned. In one, it owned warehouses that burned after unionization attempts. In another, it purchased debt from gambling clubs. In the third, a former prosecutor refused to say its name on camera. I did not need Min Seok to tell me Deo Holdings was attached to the Kwan faction, longtime rivals of the Jin family. My mouth dried in a slow, unpleasant way. Sarah noticed. "You know this company. I know enough to dislike it. Do not use your connection." I looked up. She folded her arms. "Don't make that face. You think your face is neutral. It is not. It becomes polite when you're about to lie." "I have several connections. You'll have to be more specific." "The expensive one." I leaned back. "You have been listening to Min Seok. Min Seok has been listening to you pretend not to wait for a black car twice a week. I also wait for delivery drivers. Delivery drivers don't send bodyguards to check the alley before they let you walk home." I rubbed the bridge of my nose. "It's not what you think." That sentence is never followed by peace. Sarah's anger thinned, and underneath it I saw worry sharpened by pride. "Ji-won, I know you. You would rather drown quietly than be rescued loudly. If that man is the kind of man whose enemies buy your father's debt, then whatever you are doing with him already has a cost." I wanted to deny it. I wanted to say my father's debts would have found us without Tae-hwan. That was true, but it was not complete. I had become visible to people who made a living from weakness. Visibility changes the price of everything. "I'll talk to a lawyer," I said. "I am a legal translator." "Which means you know lawyers who do not bill by the insult." She tried to laugh and failed. "I can give you names. I can also sell the office deposit and move." "You will not." "You cannot keep paying for everyone." "I know," I said, although my bank account disagreed. On the way to my mother's rehab center, I bought porridge and lied to Do-hyun about the notice. He was 22, old enough to know when I was lying and young enough to resent being protected from the details. He studied industrial design at night after working in a furniture workshop, and his hands always smelled faintly of sawdust, no matter how much he washed them. He met me in the courtyard wearing a canvas apron and a scowl. "Sarah Nuna called," he said. "Then ask her." "She said to ask you because you make the family decisions." "She said that?" "No. She said you act like an underpaid cabinet minister." "That sounds more accurate." Do-hyun took the porridge bag from me. "Hyung, are we in trouble?" The answer sat between us in the courtyard, among plastic chairs and potted chrysanthemums, while patients moved slowly along the tiled path with therapists at their elbows. Through the window, I could see my mother in the activity room, practicing left-hand grip with colored blocks. Her hair had grown silver at the temples. She had once managed a bathhouse, 3 children who were not all hers, and a husband who treated responsibility like a weather pattern. After the stroke, she remembered songs before names and apologized when her body refused instructions. She deserved a life in which no man's debt could reach her bed. "We have a legal problem," I said. "I'm looking at it." Do-hyun's jaw tightened. "That means yes." "It means I'm looking at it." "I can take more hours." "You already work too many." "So do you." "I'm older. My exhaustion has seniority." He did not smile. "I'm not a kid." "No," I said. "You're a person whose final project is due in 6 weeks." "Projects can wait." "Your life cannot." His eyes moved over my face with our family's shared talent for reading what had not been said. "Is this because of him?" I did not ask who. Do-hyun had seen Tae-hwan once from across the street. He had described him afterward as that funeral director with shoulders. "No," I said. Do-hyun gave me a look of deep disappointment. "You're a bad liar when you think you're being noble. Everyone has been reviewing my face today. Maybe stop using it for crimes." I laughed despite myself. That laugh saved both of us from the heavier thing for a moment. We went inside, fed my mother, and let her scold us for cutting the pear slices too thick. She called me by my father's name once, then cried because she knew it was wrong. I held the bowl while Do-hyun wiped her cheek, and I thought of the notice in Sarah's office. the men outside Hyejin's school, the black box in my apartment, and Tae-hwan's hand closing a window against thunder. That evening, I did not call him. Pride can look a lot like strategy when you hold it at the right angle. At 10:30, a message arrived from an unknown number. It contained one photograph, me entering Tae-hwan's private residence through the garden gate 2 weeks earlier, head turned away, umbrella low. The second photograph showed Tae-hwan's hand on my back outside the same gate. The third was not a photograph, but a drafted headline. Secret Omega lover of Jin heir linked to debt fraud family. Below it, a message. Tell Jin Tae-hwan to withdraw from the succession vote, or tomorrow morning you become public. I sat at my kitchen table while my laptop continued playing a documentary interview I had forgotten to pause. On screen, an old woman described losing her house to a redevelopment scheme. The transcript cursor blinked after the words, "I thought shame would protect them." Shame protects no one. It only saves other people the trouble of locking the door. I called Tae-hwan. He answered on the first ring. Ji-won. I hated that he did not sound surprised. Did you know? A pause. Know what? That I was being followed, that my father's debt was bought, that someone plans to use me before breakfast. The background changed. A door closed. When he spoke again, his voice had lost the faint room echo. Where are you? At home. Lock the door. It is locked. Chain. I am not one of your warehouses. Ji-won. The way he said my name made anger easier. You knew there was pressure. Yes. You didn't tell me. I did not know they had moved this quickly. That is not the question. Another pause, shorter. I should have warned you. Yes, you should have. My hand shook, so I set the phone on the table and put him on speaker. Kwon Moo-jin? Yes. Deo Holdings? Yes. Were you going to tell me after he destroyed my work, my family, and whatever remains of my dignity, or only if it became inconvenient for you? I am sending a car. I didn't ask for transport. I know. Then don't send one. It is already moving. I laughed once, flat and ugly. Of course it is. Ji-won, listen. Moo-jin wants me to step down before the family council vote. If he can show I concealed an Omega lover from a debt-tied family, he can argue I am vulnerable to blackmail. He can also pull you into court through the forged guarantee. The scandal is not the photographs. The photographs are the handle. I understand handles. People like your family collect them. He will not touch your mother or your brother. You don't get to promise that after letting me stand in the road blindfolded. His breathing changed, almost not enough to hear. I made a mistake. It was the first time I had heard him say those words. Tae-hwan apologized through corrections. A schedule changed, a driver replaced, a door left open after he noticed I disliked locked rooms. The direct admission struck a place in me that did not want to soften. You made a decision, I said. A mistake is when I put salt in coffee. Then I made the wrong decision. Outside, a scooter passed. Then rain began tapping the window in small, irregular knocks. I looked at the black box on the shelf. What happens tomorrow? If we do nothing, the article runs. Moo-jin files a complaint through the creditor. My relatives call an emergency review. Your family becomes evidence. And if we do something, I can challenge the debt, file an injunction, and publicly deny the coercive angle. The coercive angle, I repeated, that I hid you because you were disposable. I pressed my palm against my eye until sparks bloomed in the dark. Were you hiding me because I was disposable? No. Were you hiding me because I was useful? No. Then why? The rain filled the line between us. When Tae-hwan answered, his voice was quieter. Because I wanted one part of my life no one else could vote on. It was almost a confession. Almost was a country where he kept most of his feelings and expected me to apply for a visa. That sounds romantic until your rival sends me threats. I know. What do you want from me? Meet me tonight. Bring Sarah if you trust her. Bring any lawyer she recommends. We will put every option on the table. You already have an option. Yes, I waited. A marriage registration before the council can move. 6 months minimum. Strict public terms. Full legal protection for your family. Independent counsel for you. No shared bedroom unless you request it. No restriction on your work. Exit compensation held in escrow. Debt litigation funded without repayment. Your mother's treatment covered through a medical trust that does not depend on the marriage continuing. The room seemed to tilt, not from shock, but from the speed at which my life had been converted into clauses. You had that ready. I had drafts prepared for a different emergency. That does not make me feel better. It shouldn't. Is this your idea of asking? No, it is my idea of telling you what I can offer before you decide whether to refuse. I stood and walked to the window. The glass reflected my face over the blurred street. Tired eyes, damp hair from the earlier rain, mouth held in a line my mother used to call stubborn and my father used to call expensive. I was already your hidden lover. Yes. And now you want to make me your public husband. Only if you choose it. You should be careful with that word. I am trying. Trying. Another word that meant more from him than from men who spoke beautifully and left dirty cups in the sink. I hated that I knew the difference. I'll call Sarah, I said. If she tells me to run, I run. Good. You don't get to punish her for insulting you. I expect she will. She is talented. I will prepare tea. That made me pause. Tea? You drink coffee when you are angry and tea when you need to remain accurate. I closed my eyes. It was a small thing to remember. It was also a dangerous thing, because I was frightened enough to mistake being known for being safe. Don't send the car to my door, I said. 2 streets over. No men in black coats looming like undertakers. I will send Ms. Han. Your assistant terrifies me more than the guards. She terrifies everyone more efficiently. I ended the call before he could make me laugh. Sarah arrived at my apartment 20 minutes later with wet hair, a borrowed blazer, and murder in her eyes. She read the messages, cursed in 3 registers, and called Attorney Choi, a woman who had once represented whistleblowers and now represented people with enough sense to be afraid early. We met Tae-hwan at a private office above an art storage facility in Hanam. It was not his residence and not one of his company buildings. I noticed that immediately. He had chosen neutral ground, or as neutral as ground could be, with 2 guards by the elevator, and Ms. Han waiting inside with tea, towels, and a face that suggested she had filed emotions alphabetically and found most of them inefficient. Tae-hwan stood when I entered. He wore a dark suit without a tie, and he looked exactly as controlled as he always did, except for the ink on his left thumb. He had been writing by hand. He did that only when a matter was too sensitive for company systems. Sarah looked him up and down. So, you're the expensive one. Tae-hwan bowed slightly. Yang Sarah si. Don't use respectful manners to make me feel bad for disliking you. I am immune. I assumed. Attorney Choi, silver-haired and small enough that people made the mistake of underestimating her for the first 30 seconds, opened her briefcase. Everyone sit. I bill in 6-minute increments and dislike drama without documents. For the next hour, Attorney Choi took the proposed agreement apart until it stopped sounding like a trap and began to resemble an ugly shelter with visible exits. The photographs, the creditor claim, the family council rule, and the forged guarantee were placed in separate piles. The marriage would last 6 months unless both of us renewed it. There would be separate rooms, separate accounts, no physical obligation, no surprise public contact, and no restriction on my work. My mother's care would be paid through an irrevocable medical trust. Sera's office and Heejin's school would receive protection without owing Tae-hwan loyalty. Do-hyun's workplace would be left untouched, and any security assigned to me would require my approval. Attorney Choi added penalties sharp enough to make Ms. Han look almost entertained. Sera demanded an apology before she allowed the pen to move another inch. Tae-hwan stood in front of my cousin and bowed. He admitted he had kept danger from me because he had wanted to solve it before it reached me, and that the decision had protected his pride more than it protected my life. Sera did not forgive him. She told him to build consequences into the apology. He agreed to give my lawyer the same threat reports he received, to route family safety concerns through contacts outside his personal control, and to let me refuse at every stage without losing the protections. It did not make the situation clean. It made the dirt visible enough for me to decide where to step. I looked at Tae-hwan's ink-stained thumb. A man trained to hide every weakness had just let my sister correct him in front of his assistant and my lawyer. It did not fix the danger, it did not erase the secrecy, but it placed a new fact on the table beside all the paper. He could be made to answer. At 3 in the morning, Attorney Choi closed the folder. My advice? The agreement is ugly because the situation is ugly. It is also unusually protective. Without it, Mr. Yang faces immediate public harm and possible debt litigation designed to exhaust him. With it, he enters a high-risk family struggle with legal shields. Neither option is clean. Sera turned to me. Sera, you can stay with me tonight. My apartment has better coffee. Your apartment has men watching it. That is becoming common. Ji-won. I knew that tone. It held every shared winter, every unpaid bill, every moment we had survived because one of us stood in front while the others gathered what could be saved. I reached for her hand under the table. I'm not saying yes because of him. Tae-hwan's face did not change, but his hand closed around his pen. I'm saying yes because the alternative lets Moo-jin write the story, I continued. I refuse to be evidence in someone else's family war without at least editing the sentence. Attorney Choi nodded as if that was legally sound. Tae-hwan said, You can still refuse. I know. Do you? I met his gaze. That question would have meant more before the photographs. Pain passed behind his eyes so quickly, someone else might have missed it. I did not. I had learned him in private. The small delay before he touched a glass when angry, the way he buttoned his jacket before saying something final, how he looked away only when tenderness made him feel exposed. He looked away then. Then we build refusal into every stage, he said. If at any point continuing harms you more than leaving, you leave and keep every protection. Attorney Choi wrote again. We'll put that in. By dawn, the agreement had become thicker, less elegant, and more mine. I insisted on keeping my apartment for the full term, even if I stayed at Tae-hwan's residence for public optics. I kept my work contracts. I added a clause forbidding his people from contacting my clients without permission. I required an independent phone line for security emergencies that did not route through him. Sera added language protecting Do-hyun's school and workplace. Attorney Choi added penalties large enough to make Ms. Han's eyebrows rise slightly, which I considered a victory. When the first pale light touched the blinds, Tae-hwan walked me to the elevator. Sera and Attorney Choi stayed behind to review final edits. Ms. Han pretended not to watch us by reading a tablet upside down. In the hallway, I said, We were already complicated. Yes. This makes us worse. Yes. Do you always agree when you want to argue? No. Tae-hwan. He turned toward me. There were faint shadows beneath his eyes. He looked older than 34 for the first time since I had known him. Not weak, only tired in a way expensive suits could not repair. "I want to argue," he said. "I want to tell you I can handle Mujin, that the council will fall in line, that your family will be safe. I can make some of that true. Not all. You asked for honesty." The elevator numbers glowed above us. "What else?" I asked. His gaze moved to my mouth, then away before it became a request. "I hated hearing you say yes for reasons that were not me." The jealousy in his voice was stripped down, quiet, almost embarrassing because he did not decorate it. My first reaction was anger. My second was a grief I did not have time for. "You don't get jealousy as a reward for hiding me," I said. "I know." "Do you?" "I am learning the cost." The elevator arrived. Its doors opened onto an empty, mirrored box. I stepped inside, then turned back. "You should sleep." "So should you." I edit better sleep-deprived. My standards become violent. His mouth moved, nearly a smile. "I remember." The doors closed between us, and I saw my own reflection. A man holding a folder that could become a shield or a cage, depending on how carefully he watched the hinges. The scandal broke at 8:17. By 8:22, Ms. Han released a statement through Seogang Meridian's legal office announcing my engagement to Jin Tae-hwan, condemning illegal surveillance, and warning against defamatory claims related to my family. By 9, 3 outlets had changed secret Omega lover to private fiancé. By 10, Kwon Moo-jin's people leaked the debt story anyway. By 10:15, Attorney Choi filed the first injunction. By noon, my phone contained 93 messages, 6 missed calls from clients, 1 apology from a producer who had always paid late, and a voice message from my mother asking whether I had forgotten to bring her blue cardigan. The world can rearrange itself around you and still expect errands. I went to the rehab center with Do-hyun because hiding would make the story larger. 2 security staff followed at a distance after I approved their names and faces. They wore ordinary jackets and looked bored enough to be believable. Do-hyun hated them immediately. "Do they have to stand like that?" he asked outside the elevator. "They are standing normally. They stand like refrigerators with secrets. One of them is named Mr. Park. Try humanizing the refrigerator." I refuse. Inside, my mother watched a morning drama with 2 other patients. The television volume was too high. Her hand rested on the blue cardigan she had asked for. When she saw me, she smiled, then frowned at the security men through the glass. "Are you famous?" she asked. "Only in a very inconvenient way." Do-hyun choked on a laugh. I knelt by her chair and fixed the cardigan around her shoulders. She touched my face with her good hand, thumb brushing the faint scar near my ear. "You look thin," she said. "I am stylish." "You look worried." "That too." Her eyes drifted to the television, where a chaebol heir argued with a woman in a hospital hallway. "Is your man kind?" Do-hyun went silent. My mother's lucidity came and went like sunlight through clouds, and when it arrived, none of us knew how long we had. I could have lied. I could have said yes because the world expected simple words around sick parents. Instead, I thought of Tae-hwan bowing to Sarah, of the clause he added after I wounded him, of his voice admitting jealousy without using it as a chain. "He is trying to be," I said. My mother nodded as if that mattered more than success. "Are you kind to him?" The question found a place I had neglected. I had measured Tae-hwan's failures with precision because I needed to survive them. I had not measured my own power over him because hidden lovers often pretend they have none. But I knew where to place a sentence so it hurt. I knew how to withdraw without slamming a door. I knew he listened when I said his name. "I don't know," I said. "Find out," she told me, and then complained that Do-hyun had bought the wrong pears. On the 3rd day of the scandal, I moved into Tae-hwan's residence for appearances. Residence was his word. House was too ordinary. Fortress was impolite but closer. It sat behind high walls in Seongbuk-dong, all stone paths, old pines, and windows that reflected the sky without revealing rooms. I had been there before through the garden gate, always at night, always leaving before staff arrived. Entering at noon with 2 suitcases and a marriage agreement in my bag felt like walking into a rumor wearing my shoes. Ms. Han met me in the front hall. "Mr. Jin is at headquarters. He will return by 7 unless the council meeting turns violent in a legal sense." "Is that common?" "Legal violence is his preferred kind." She introduced me to the house manager, Mrs. O, a woman in her 60s whose politeness had the density of reinforced concrete. Mrs. O showed me the guest suite at the West End, the kitchen, the library, the small gym I would never use, and the private elevator to the underground garage. She did not mention the East Wing until I asked. "Mr. Jin's rooms," she said. "Do they have a moat?" "Only staff with clearance enter." I was joking. I was not. My suite had a bedroom, a sitting room, and a bathroom larger than my apartment kitchen. On the desk sat a new monitor calibrated for caption editing, a keyboard of the exact model I used, and an ergonomic chair I had once praised in passing while complaining about back pain. There was also a printed note. These were purchased through company procurement. They are not personal gifts. If any item is wrong, Ms. Han will replace it. I read it twice and laughed because it was so intensely him that irritation lost balance. He had remembered my chair, then protected me from gratitude with accounting language. I worked for 3 hours because work was the one country where my passport still functioned. A short documentary about abandoned train stations filled my screen. I adjusted captions while outside, somewhere beyond the thick glass, men who probably knew how to dispose of a car spoke softly into earpieces. At 6, Sarah called. "Are you alive? Unless rich people bathrooms are the afterlife. Do not joke about dying in a mafia house. It has heated floors. There are worse exits." She sighed. Hyejin's mother says no one followed her today. The landlord suddenly wants to discuss renewal terms like a civilized mammal. Sarah was quiet for a moment. "Ji-won, I'm angry at him. I'm also angry you didn't tell me you were lonely enough to accept half a relationship." The words landed harder because they were not cruel. It wasn't half when we were alone. That may be the saddest defense I've heard today. I leaned back and watched the subtitle timeline crawl across the screen. I know. You don't have to make it real because the public already thinks it is. I know that too. Do you? Everyone keeps asking me that. Because you are clever enough to explain your way into a locked room. After we hung up, I sat without working. The house made expensive sounds, distant water in pipes, a door closing softly, the hush of tires outside. I thought of Sarah's phrase, half a relationship, and hated that it fit in places I had not wanted to examine. Tae-hwan had never lied about the danger. I had never lied about wanting more. We had simply placed both truths side by side and agreed not to ask which one would grow. At 7:12, he knocked on the open door frame. He never entered without permission, even in his own house. That habit had once made me fond. Now it made me wary of how much I could forgive. "You're late by 12 minutes, I said. Council meeting became legally violent. Ms. Han predicted it. She enjoys being right. He stepped in after I nodded. His suit jacket was gone, his sleeves rolled to the forearms. A faint red mark cut across one knuckle. I looked at it. Legal violence? A cousin knocked over a glass. Was your hand under it? I caught the tray. Of course you did. He followed my gaze to the monitor. The equipment is acceptable? The note was ridiculous. It was accurate. You bought me an expensive chair and then tried to hide behind procurement. Did it work? No. Then I will revise the method." I shouldn't have smiled. I did anyway, briefly, and his attention settled on that smile as if it were a fragile object he had no right to touch. Dinner was served in a small room overlooking the garden, not the formal dining room where a person could grow old waiting for salt to cross the table. Mrs. O brought grilled fish, rice, soup, and side dishes arranged with quiet care. Tae-hwan sat across from me. The distance was polite enough for a negotiation and intimate enough for discomfort. "We need to appear at the injunction hearing together," he said. "I expected that. Jin will try to provoke you." "Does he prefer insults or fake concern?" "Fake concern. He thinks it ages better in photographs. I can handle fake concern." "I know." The words were simple, and I almost missed their difference. He did not say I would be protected from it. He said I could handle it. My chopsticks paused over the fish. "What?" he asked. "Nothing." "You dislike that answer from me." "I dislike that you remember my dislikes while creating new ones." He accepted that with a small nod. "Tomorrow, if you want me to speak, touch your left cuff. If you want to answer yourself, set your hand flat on the table. If you want to leave, close your folder. No one will stop you." The signals were practical. They also assumed I might know my own mind in a room designed to overwhelm me. "Did Ms. Han create those?" "No." "You did?" "Yes." "Why?" "Because asking you aloud in front of cameras would create pressure." I looked down at my bowl. The soup had gone cool at the edges. "You are very good at noticing pressure after it has already done damage. I am trying to notice earlier." "You keep saying that. I don't have a better word yet." He sounded frustrated with himself, not with me. The distinction mattered. Too much, perhaps. The injunction hearing took place in a courthouse corridor, crowded with reporters who pretended not to block our path. Attorney Choi walked ahead like a blade in sensible shoes. Sarah came beside me, hair pinned back, black suit sharp enough to cut gossip. Tae-hwan walked on my other side, close but not touching. Cameras flashed, questions snapped from every direction. "Yang Ji-won-si, were you pressured into the engagement?" "Is your father connected to illegal lenders?" "Did Jin Tae-hwan hide you because of family opposition?" "Are you truly bonded?" The last question made my jaw tighten. Tae-hwan's hand moved half an inch, then stopped. He had remembered. No surprise contact. He glanced at my left cuff. I placed my hand flat against my folder. "I'll answer," I said. The reporters quieted in that hungry way crowds do when someone they expect to tremble clears his throat. "My father's alleged debts are under legal review," I said. "My mother did not consent to any recent guarantee. My family is cooperating with lawful procedures. As for my private life, illegal surveillance does not become public interest because someone profits from it. I will not apologize for being photographed entering a place where I was invited." A murmur passed through the corridor. Sarah's mouth twitched. Attorney Choi looked almost proud, which from her was a standing ovation. Kwon Mu-jin appeared near the courtroom doors as if summoned by discomfort. He was handsome in a smooth, forgettable way, all tailored gray and sympathetic eyes. If Tae-hwan made people stand straighter, Mu-jin made them lean closer before realizing their pockets were lighter. "Ji-won-si," he said, voice pitched for microphones. "I am sorry you've been dragged into this. Powerful men often mistake affection for ownership." It was a good sentence. I resented good sentences used badly. Tae-hwan's face became unreadable. I touched my left cuff once, not because I needed him to speak for me, but because I wanted to see what he would choose. He did not step in front of me. He turned slightly toward Mu-jin while leaving me fully visible. "Then you should stop treating him as a root to me," Tae-hwan said. Mu-jin smiled. "You sound protective." I am accountable. The smile thinned. A reporter shouted, "Does that mean you admit the relationship was hidden?" Tae-hwan looked at the cameras. "I kept my private life private. That gave others room to harm Mr. Yang. I will answer for that in the ways that matter to him, not to your headline." The corridor shifted again. Public men usually apologize to the public first. Tae-hwan had directed the sentence toward me without looking at me. For one irrational second, I wanted the hidden months back so I could place this version of him inside them and see if the damage changed shape. The hearing went well enough to make enemies quiet and badly enough to keep them active. The judge froze the debt claim pending signature verification and warned the creditor against contacting family members. Attorney Choi filed additional complaints regarding surveillance. Mu-jin left before the reporters could ask him why his shell company had obtained photographs from private property. Outside, Sarah hugged me so hard my folder bent. "You did well," she said. "I was terrified." After the hearing, Tae-hwan's mother summoned us to dinner. Jin Tae-hwan was courteous in the way a locked cabinet is courteous, polished, quiet, and not meant to be opened without a key. She asked about my work, my mother, Sarah's office, and Do-hyun's school, each question shaped like concern and measurement at once. When Tae-hwan stepped away to answer Ms. Han's call, she told me that her son had learned secrecy at 17, after an uncle used a girl who had merely lent him class notes to remind him that affection could be turned into leverage. "Understanding a wound is not the same as accepting the behavior it produced," she said, pouring tea as if she had not just handed me a knife with the handle wrapped. "If you stay near him, do not become another secret he calls protection. If you leave, do not let guilt dress itself as gratitude." On the way back, that story sat between us in the car before I finally named it. On the drive back, Tae-hwan was quiet even by his standards. I watched the city slide past. Convenience stores, wet pavement, office lights, people carrying umbrellas like small private roofs. Halfway across the bridge, I said, "Your mother told me about the classmate." His hand tightened on the steering wheel. He had dismissed the driver that evening because, he said, he wanted fewer ears. I had accepted because I wanted fewer witnesses. She should not have. She told me for my benefit, not yours. I know. Did you love her? No. He considered because he never gave careless answers when truth cost something. I liked that she treated me as a student who forgot homework, not as a name. My uncle used her family to remind me the difference. "So you learned to remove people from your visible life?" "Yes." "And when we became visible anyway?" "I tried to turn you into something they could not easily attack. A spouse. A legal position. A position is not a person." "I know. You keep arriving at knowledge after impact." The sentence struck. He drove another block before answering. "When Mu-jin sent the photographs, I was afraid, not of losing the vote." "What then?" "That you would see the machinery around me and understand I had invited you near it." "You did invite me?" "Yes." The honesty was plain enough that I could not use it for a fight. I looked at his profile, the city light moving over the sharp line of his cheek, the mouth that had learned restraint until even apology seemed rationed. "I came too." "You did not know enough." "I knew you were not a school teacher with a mild family." That almost drew a smile. It failed. "I should have given you enough to refuse intelligently." There it was, the thing beneath every clause and apology. Not romance, consent after information. The lack of it had cracked what we had built in private. No kiss, no paid bill, no careful memory could repair it alone. "At the end of 6 months," I said, "if we reach it, I decide publicly and privately. Not your counsel, not Mu-jin, not my fear. Yes. If I leave, You don't become noble and disappear without conversation because you think it protects me." His glance flicked to me. "No. If I stay, it won't be because you made yourself necessary. I am trying to make myself less necessary." It was an odd sentence from a man raised to control every variable. It stayed with me after we returned, after I went to the West Suite, after I opened my laptop and failed to work. Near midnight, I took the locked black box from my bag. The cufflinks inside looked less romantic under the desk lamp, more like artifacts from a country that had changed its borders. I carried them to the East Wing. Mrs. O watched me pass from the end of the hall and pretended she had always intended to inspect a vase at midnight. Tae-hwan opened his door on the second knock. He had changed into a black sweater and loose trousers. Without the suit, he looked less like a verdict and more like a man who did not know where to put his hands. I held out the cufflinks. "I kept these after you left them at my apartment." I wondered where they went. "You knew?" "Yes." "Why didn't you ask? You kept them in a locked box." That seemed like an answer. I stepped into his study after he moved aside. It was smaller than I expected, lined with books and old case files. On the desk sat a wooden puzzle cube, worn at the edges. Beside it lay a photograph turned face down. "I'm returning them," I said. His expression became very still. "Not because I'm ending anything tonight," I added, "because I don't want souvenirs from a hidden relationship inside my room while we pretend to be married in public. If we build something now, it needs different objects." He accepted the cufflinks slowly, as if they weighed more than silver. "What kind of objects?" "I don't know. Receipts for shared groceries. A terrible mug. A spare charger we fight over. A legal agreement with penalties." "That is already our least romantic object." He set the cufflinks on the desk. The puzzle cube was my brother's. I had not asked. The offering entered the room quietly and changed it. Tae-hwan had mentioned no siblings. Public profiles described him as the only son. "Your brother?" "Half-brother. Jin Tae-hwan, 3 years younger. He died when I was 21. "I'm sorry." Tae-hwan touched the cube with one finger, turning it a 1/4 inch. He was better at this than I was. People, rooms. He could make my grandfather laugh, which I considered a waste of strategy. "How did he die?" "Car accident after a council dinner. Officially. Unofficially, a driver loyal to my uncle failed to notice brake work." The study seemed to shrink around us. Tae-hwan. I could not prove it then. My father chose stability over accusation. My mother never forgave him. I learned that family grief becomes policy if enough money surrounds it. The control in his voice did not break. That made the grief more visible, not less. He did not ask me to comfort him. He did not perform vulnerability like a payment. He simply turned the cube again, aligning one faded side. Is that why the succession matters? Partly. My uncle's faction survives through the council. Jin is his polished instrument. If they take the legitimate group, they bury every record that could reopen old crimes. And you need a spouse because your grandfather wanted to control you, even dead. A breath that might have been a laugh left him. That is one interpretation. I looked at the photograph. "May I?" He hesitated, then nodded. The photo showed 2 boys in school uniforms sitting on stone steps. Tae-hwan, at perhaps 18, already looked too serious. Beside him, a younger boy grinned at the camera with one arm flung over Tae-hwan's shoulder. Tae-hwan's hand was raised halfway, as if he had been about to remove the arm and then decided against it. "You loved him," I said. "Yes." The word had no decoration. It did not need any. I set the photograph down carefully. I won't become proof that people near you are doomed. His eyes lifted to mine. But I also won't be hidden so you can feel safer, I continued. Those are not the only two options. I know. Say it differently. He understood what I meant. He always did, when he let himself. The seconds passed. Outside the study windows, rain began again, softer than before. You are not my brother's ghost, he said. You are not a weakness I failed to conceal. You are Yang Ji-won. I harmed you by deciding which risks you were allowed to see. I do not want to do that again. My throat tightened. I wanted to touch him, and because wanting had become complicated, I did not move. He noticed. May I hold your hand? The question undid me more than a sudden embrace would have. I nodded. His hand closed around mine, warm and steady. No claim, no performance, just contact permitted in a room where grief had been kept with old paper and a child's puzzle. We stood that way until the rain steadied. Nothing was solved. Something had been named. The memorial dinner took place 6 days later at a private hall owned by the Jin family foundation. By then, I had learned several rules of public life beside Tae-hwan. Walk slowly enough for cameras, but not so slowly that fear looked photogenic. Smile only when spoken to by allies. A constant smile invited speculation about sedation. Accept water from Ms. Han, not from strangers. Never let a family elder guide you by the elbow unless you wanted to spend the evening being positioned like furniture. I wore a dark blue suit chosen by myself after rejecting 3 options from a stylist who believed Omegas attending mafia-adjacent memorials should look delicate. Tae-hwan waited outside my suite while I adjusted the cuffs. You look angry, he said. I look tailored. The tailor is afraid of you now. He suggested pearl buttons. A grave error. At the hall, Jin relatives greeted us with smiles calibrated by faction. Heir stood near the entrance, elegant as a drawn blade. Tae-hwan's uncle, Jin Myung-rok, welcomed me with both hands and eyes that counted exits. He was in his 60s, handsome in the manner of men whose crimes had been laundered by good skin care. Mu-jin stood behind him, expression soft with false sympathy. Ji-won-si, Myung-rok said, you must be overwhelmed. Our family can be difficult to understand. I work with badly recorded interviews, I said. I'm used to reconstructing meaning from noise. Hyeran made a small sound into her tea. Myung-rok's smile held. Clever. Professionally. At dinner, they tried to seat me beside distant cousins below Mu-jin. Hyeran's warning returned. Before Tae-hwan spoke, I looked at the place card, picked it up, and handed it to a staff member. There seems to be an error, I said. I am seated beside my husband. The word husband felt strange in my mouth, legal, public, not yet fully personal. The room heard it anyway. The staff member froze. Myung-rok turned. Tae-hwan did not rescue me. He stood beside his chair and waited as if the correction had already been accepted by reality. Mu-jin said lightly, New spouses often need guidance. I smiled at him. Then guide me correctly. A cousin coughed. Hyeran looked at her plate. The place card moved. I sat beside Tae-hwan, and beneath the table, his hand rested near mine without touching. Approval would have annoyed me. Trust steadied me. The dinner itself was a museum of threats disguised as toasts. Myung-rok spoke of loyalty. Mu-jin spoke of modern leadership. Hyeran spoke of the dead with such restrained fury that several men stopped drinking. I watched Tae-hwan listen, answer, refuse bait, and place one small piece of braised fish on my plate after noticing I had not eaten. I gave him a look. He leaned close enough to murmur, You get blunt when hungry. I am blunt now. Imagine the escalation. I can feed myself. I know. I ate the fish because refusing would have made it important. It was annoyingly good. After dinner, Mu-jin found me near the hallway leading to the garden. I had stepped out to breathe. 2 approved security staff stood within sight, but he positioned himself where cameras from the family archive would catch us if I raised my voice. "You're adapting quickly," he said, "and you're still using concern like cheap perfume." His smile sharpened. "Tae-hwan enjoys difficult things until they become costly. I'll inform my mirror. He won't tell you how this ends. He'll win the vote, secure the company, and then what? Keep you in a pretty room? Send you back with money? Men like him don't marry for love. They acquire solutions." The words would have hurt less if they were entirely false. Men like you don't warn for kindness. You prefer rot to spread where you point. I'm offering you a door. You sent photographers to my home. I used what he exposed. No, you used what I did not consent to show. For the first time, irritation broke through his polish. You think consent matters here? A cold clarity entered me. I realized then that Jin did not only underestimate me, he underestimated the concept of a person without institutional power still owning himself. "Yes," I said, "that is why men like you fear records." His eyes narrowed. I lifted my phone. The screen was recording. "I caption interviews for a living. I prefer clean audio, but this will do." He stepped back, face closing. Tae-hwan appeared at the end of the hall. He took in my phone, Jin's expression, the angle of the cameras, and me. For half a second, the old version of him surfaced, the man who could remove obstacles before they knew they had become obstacles. Then he looked at me and stopped walking. "Do you need anything?" he asked. Not what happened. Not, "I'll handle him." "Do you need anything?" I saved the recording and slipped the phone into my pocket. "Attorney Choi will enjoy this." Jin laughed softly. "You two are charming." Tae-hwan's voice stayed even. "Leave my husband alone." There it was, jealousy wearing formal clothes. It should have irritated me. It did, a little, but he had not used it to push me aside. He had let me collect the blade before standing near enough to make the next step costly. The recording from the memorial dinner gave Attorney Choi a lever, and the days that followed became less dramatic and more exhausting. Jin's shell creditor lost confidence when his own words began moving through legal channels. 2 of my clients paused contracts, 1 museum quietly offered more work, and the Disability Rights Archive sent a message telling me my deadline mattered less than my safety. Zara, meanwhile, discovered that her landlord had rented another floor to a Deo subsidiary. She sold the monstrous printer she loved too much, moved her office to a smaller room in Uljiro, and announced that shrinking a space was not the same as shrinking her life. Do-hyun built her shelves. Hyejin cried because the new windows opened. Tae-hwan came with coffee and was forced to hold brackets steady under Sera's supervision. Watching him kneel on cheap laminate while my cousin called him useful in the least romantic tone imaginable made the public marriage feel less like a headline and more like a difficult household learning where everyone stood. The scandal also damaged my work in ways money could not simply erase. When a documentary institute withdrew a workshop because an anonymous donor objected to my political distraction, I told Attorney Choi before I told Tae-hwan. He disliked the order, then made himself understand it. Instead of offering me replacement income through his network, he had Ms. Han compile public grants and donor records I could use or ignore. I turned my workshop notes into a free guide first, out of spite, then into a paid course, later, out of common sense. Tae-hwan called that weaponized clarity. I told him he weaponized silence. He agreed too easily, and the agreement itself felt like progress. The emotional turn, if I had to name it later, did not arrive with dramatic lighting. It came in a hospital supply room smelling of disinfectant and cardboard. My mother developed pneumonia during a rainy week. Not severe, the doctor said, but enough to require transfer to a larger hospital for monitoring. I was at a client meeting when the rehab center called. Tae-hwan was in a council preparation session. I called Sera, who was across town. I called Do-hyun, who was unreachable in the workshop basement. Then, I called the emergency security line, not Tae-hwan, because we had built it for exactly this. The approved driver took me to the hospital. By the time I arrived, my mother was settled in a curtained bed, irritated by the oxygen tube and convinced the nurse had stolen her socks. I found her socks under the blanket, negotiated with the nurse, signed forms, and sat in a plastic chair with my bag on my knees. For 3 hours, I was not a scandal or spouse or pressure point. I was a son watching a monitor count breaths. Tae-hwan arrived near midnight. He did not bring an entourage. He did not demand updates from staff as if purchasing competence. He stood at the curtain until I saw him. "How did you know?" I asked. Ms. Han told me the emergency line was used for hospital transport. She did not give details. I called Sera. She said I could come if I behaved like a human being. She said that? She used longer wording. He looked tired. There was rain on his coat. In one hand, he carried a paper bag. "My mother doesn't need anything," I said. "It's for you." Inside were socks, thick gray socks from a convenience store. I stared at them. He said, "Hospitals are cold. You gave your mother yours during the winter admission in February." I had told him that once, half asleep, after he noticed a scar on my ankle from a heater burn. The memory should not have survived in his head among council votes and criminal ledgers. It had. "Thank you," I said. He nodded and sat on the floor beside my chair because the other chairs were taken by sleeping relatives. Jin Tae-hwan, CEO, heir, terrifying alpha, sat on hospital linoleum in a rain-damp coat and unpacked a triangle kimbap from the bag. "You need to eat," he said. "I hate hospital food." "This is convenience store food." "Worse?" "More honest." I took it. We ate quietly. My mother slept behind the curtain. A man across the room snored in bursts. Nurses moved through the ward with the exhausted competence of people holding society together while everyone else argued about power. After a while, I looked down. Tae-hwan had removed his coat and folded it beneath him so the floor would not stain his trousers, but his posture had begun to curve with fatigue. In his left hand, half hidden against his knee, he held the wooden puzzle cube from his study. His thumb moved over one worn edge again and again. "You brought Seo-jun's cube," I said. He stilled. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." My brother died in a hospital before I arrived. His voice remained low, almost level. "Different hospital, different year. Still, the corridors know." I set the kimbap down. He looked toward the curtain where my mother slept. "When Ms. Han said hospital, I thought of you sitting alone. Then I thought of turning the car around because my presence might make a hard night heavier." "Why didn't you?" "Because absence can be a kind of cowardice." The words entered me slowly. Tae-hwan had always been controlled, even in tenderness. But this was not controlled in the way a wall is controlled. It was controlled in the way a hand carrying hot water is controlled. With effort to avoid burning someone else. He had come without taking over. He had brought socks, not specialists. He sat on the floor instead of rearranging the ward. He carried grief in his hand and still asked permission with his body. I reached down. "May I?" He gave me the cube. It was lighter than I expected, old wood rubbed smooth by years. I turned one side, not trying to solve it. My father left debts instead of objects. Sometimes I envy people with keepsakes, even painful ones. Objects can lie too. Yes, but they don't interrupt. That earned the faintest breath of amusement. I gave it back. His fingers brushed mine. The contact was brief, permitted by neither of us aloud but refused by neither. In that small hospital corner, beneath fluorescent lights and the soft mechanical rhythm of oxygen, my understanding of him changed. Not healed, not excused, changed. I saw the boy who had learned to remove people from danger by removing himself from them. I saw the man trying, clumsily and expensively, to learn presence as a discipline. My mother improved over the next 2 days. During that time, Tae-hwan did not send flowers. He sent a charging cable, clean clothes through Sarah, and one message: "I am outside for 20 minutes if you want air. If not, I will leave." I went outside. We stood beneath the hospital awning while rain fell beyond it. I was wearing the gray socks. He noticed and said nothing, which was the closest he came to pride. "I am afraid," I said. He looked at me. "Of your mother?" "Of many things. Her health, Jin, the council, becoming comfortable in your house, missing you when you're not there, wanting you for reasons that are no longer easy to separate from gratitude." His face grew still. "I need you not to answer beautifully," I said. "I need you not to make it easier. I don't know how to answer beautifully." "You do, by accident." Rain struck the pavement in silver lines. He looked out at the traffic instead of at me, and I was grateful. "I want you to stay after the agreement ends," he said. "That is the plainest version. I don't want fear, debt, family pressure, or gratitude to make that happen. I also don't know how to stand nearby while you decide you may leave." That was almost beautiful. "I apologize." I laughed, then covered my face. The laugh came too close to tears. He did not touch me. "What do you need?" "For you to keep making it possible for me to leave." His answer came without delay, and then I will. The final pressure began 4 days before the council vote. Attorney Choi received confirmation that the signature on my mother's alleged guarantee was forged. The debt case should have collapsed. Instead, Jin's faction leaked a different claim: that I had accepted Jin money to fabricate evidence, that Sarah's office had translated documents for illegal lenders, and that the marriage was a payoff. It was clever because it dirtied our defense by attaching it to the truth that we did have a marriage agreement and financial protections. At the same time, Jin Myung-rok called for a private family review of Tae-hwan's spouse before the vote. The spouse, meaning me, would be asked to affirm the marriage's legitimacy before council elders. Refusal would strengthen Jin. Attendance would place me in a room with men who considered consent a public relations term, Tae-hwan told me in the library. He had the look he wore before cutting losses. "No," he said before I responded. "You don't know what I was going to say. You were going to ask what happens if we attend. I like information. And I am saying no." The word landed badly. "Try again." His jaw tightened. "I will not have you interrogated by my family." "That is better, but still not a decision you make alone. They will twist every answer. Then we prepare better answers. Ji-won. Do not use concern to close a door." He turned away, hands braced on the table. For a moment, I saw the old reflex winning. Remove the person, reduce the variable, call the absence safety. I waited. Waiting was not passive with him. It made space he had to choose how to fill. Finally, he said, "If you attend, they will ask whether our marriage is physically real. They will imply your protections are payment. They will speak politely enough that objecting looks unstable. Jin will use the recording whether you go or not." I know how polite cruelty sounds. "I know you do." "Then trust me to recognize it." He looked back. "Trusting you is not the difficulty. Trusting the room is." "I'm not asking you to trust the room." "What are you asking?" "To stand beside me without turning me into a hostage you guard from questions." He closed his eyes briefly. When he opened them, the fight had not left him, but it had changed direction. "Attorney Choi attends." "Yes." "Sarah watches remotely." "She will insist." You can end it with one word. I choose the word. Yes. The review took place in a private conference chamber beneath Seogang Meridian's headquarters because powerful families enjoy hiding old customs under modern elevators. Attorney Choi sat to my right. Tae-hwan sat to my left. Across from us were 5 council elders, Jin Myung-rok, Kwon Moo-jin, and Hae-ran, whose face revealed nothing except the probable cost of everyone's funeral. They asked about the timeline of our relationship. I answered with dates that were true but limited. They asked why we had not announced the engagement earlier. Tae-hwan said, "Because I valued privacy more than optics. That was my error." They asked whether money had influenced my decision. I said, "Security influenced my decision. So did legal counsel. If this family finds that shameful, it should examine why danger surrounded the decision in the first place." Attorney Choi's pen paused in approval. Moo-jin leaned forward. "Ji-won-si, are you in love with Jin Tae-hwan?" There it was, the question designed to make any answer useful. Yes would look purchased. No would look fraudulent. Silence would look afraid. Tae-hwan's hand moved beneath the table, then stopped before touching mine. He was leaving the answer mine. I looked at Moo-jin. I am not here to perform intimacy for men who confuse testimony with ownership. A council elder frowned. This review concerns legitimacy. Then review the documents. The marriage is registered. The agreement is legal. The protections are disclosed to my attorney. My private feelings are not family assets. Myung-rok smiled. A passionate defense. No, a professional boundary. Hae-ran coughed into her hand. It sounded suspiciously like a laugh. Moo-jin's eyes hardened. And if Mr. Jin loses the vote, will you remain his husband? The room waited. I felt Tae-hwan beside me, not moving, not rescuing, not closing the folder for me. I will remain or leave according to decisions made after the emergency no longer holds my family by the throat, I said. If your counsel requires a spouse who cannot walk away, you are not reviewing legitimacy. You are measuring captivity. The older men shifted. The word captivity had entered the room wearing no perfume. Myung-rok's voice cooled. You speak boldly for someone protected by my nephew. I speak boldly because I know the difference between protection and possession. Attorney Choi said, For the record, any implication that my client's legal protections are contingent upon personal compliance will be included in our filings. The review ended badly for Moo-jin because he had expected embarrassment and received minutes. It ended badly for Myung-rok because Hae-ran, still seated, asked why the council was more interested in my private life than in the surveillance and extortion conducted by a faction attached to Deo Holdings. She placed documents on the table. Tae-hwan placed more. Ms. Han, waiting outside, had prepared copies with tabs. The documents did not accuse Myung-rok of murder. They did not need to. They mapped shell companies, old driver payments, insurance claims, creditor purchases, and recent media leaks. They created a path toward legal exposure wide enough for frightened allies to reconsider loyalty. The council elders, masters of survival, began asking Moo-jin questions he did not enjoy. I had my own part. The recording from the memorial dinner hallway played through Attorney Choi's tablet. Moo-jin's voice filled the chamber. You think consent matters here? No one spoke for several seconds afterward. Tae-hwan could have used that moment to crush him. I saw the option pass through him. Instead, he said, This council will decide whether it wants leadership that creates liability by coercion or stability through lawful separation of business from faction violence. I will not trade my husband's autonomy for votes. If my position requires that, I withdraw my candidacy and take the records to prosecutors. The room changed. I turned to him. That was not in our plan. His face remained forward. His hand on the table was relaxed, almost too relaxed. He had placed the succession, his years of strategy, perhaps his revenge for Seo Jun, on the edge of my freedom, and chosen not to bargain with it. Myung-rok understood first. You would destroy your family. Tae-hwan looked at him. You made destruction sound like inheritance. The vote did not happen that day. Emergency reviews rarely produce clean endings. But Mujin's faction fractured before evening. 2 elders requested independent audits. Daeo's creditor withdrew the claim against my mother within 48 hours, not from kindness, but because forged signatures had become radioactive. The institute that withdrew my workshop sent an apology so stiff it could stand without furniture. Sarah framed a copy in her new office bathroom. The council eventually confirmed Tae-hwan as head of the legitimate group under conditions that forced several criminal-linked operations into divestment. I did not pretend that made the Jin family clean. Money with old blood does not become pure because lawyers move it through better channels. But visible consequences occurred. Men who had once spoken through threats now spoke through attorneys. Mujin left the country for medical rest, which Attorney Choi described as cowardice with a passport. Myung-rok suffered a fall in influence so dramatic that even gossip seemed winded. 3 months into the 6-month agreement, Tae-hwan asked Attorney Choi to dissolve the spouse requirement privately and preserve every protection independently. He did it without telling me first, which almost caused our largest argument. You made a legal change involving me without telling me? I demanded in the West Suite, holding the revised documents Ms. Han had delivered with the grim expression of someone who knew a storm had been scheduled. Tae-hwan stood by the window. The change benefits you. The weather benefits crops. It still doesn't ask consent. I wanted to remove pressure before discussing us. I stared at him. You tried to create freedom by making another unilateral decision. He opened his mouth, closed it, and looked genuinely pained by his own stupidity. Yes. Ms. Han from the doorway said, I advised against the surprise element. Thank you, I said. Tae-hwan turned slightly. You may leave. I know I may leave. That is not the point. What is? That freedom is not a document you slide under my door like a utility bill. He took that in. Then he did something I had never seen him do in anger or business. He sat down before he had an answer. Not at the desk, not in the chair positioned for authority, but on the edge of the low table, hands loosely clasped. You're right, he said. Ms. Han whispered. Progress, and left before he could glare. I shouldn't have laughed. I did. Then I sat across from him, because the argument deserved furniture. We went through the revision line by line. The medical trust remained irrevocable. The legal foundation continued funding the debt case and related claims without repayment. Security could be reduced or ended by me. The exit payment released immediately, not after the original term. My apartment lease had been extended in my name. Public statements, if we separated, would cite privacy and mutual respect. No penalty, no clawback, no condition hidden in polite language. By the end, my anger had become something more difficult. Relief, perhaps. Grief for the version of myself who had needed clauses to believe a door existed. You could have waited 6 months, I said. Yes. Why now? Because I heard myself in the review room. I said I would not trade your autonomy for votes. Then I realized the agreement still made your life easier if you stayed and more difficult if you left, even with protections. I wanted that imbalance removed. Before asking whether I loved you? Yes. I looked at him. The question we had avoided sat between us, no longer useful as a weapon and therefore more frightening. Do you want to ask? I said. His voice was low. No. Pain moved through me before he added, I want you to tell me only if the answer belongs to you, not to the timing. I set the papers down. You are learning dangerous amounts of decency. Is that a complaint? Give me time to decide. We did not become simple after that. Simplicity would have insulted the work. I moved back to my apartment for 2 weeks because I needed to remember the shape of my own mornings, and Tae-hwan did not object or send a car unless I requested one. He came over once to repair a loose shelf after Do-hyun declared the wall structurally emotional. Tae-hwan brought tools, took off his shoes, and stood beneath my leaning lamp as if the apartment deserved boardroom respect. While he fixed the bracket, I made noodles. We ate at my narrow table with our knees almost touching because the room allowed no grand distances. He noticed the basil had revived. I noticed he washed his own bowl without turning competence into a performance. When he reached for his coat, I said he could stay for tea. There was no rain to blame. He understood that and stayed anyway. The first kiss after the scandal was not our first kiss, which made it stranger. It happened by my kitchen sink after we argued about whether subtitles should preserve dialect grammar. He said structure mattered. I said texture mattered too. He accused me of using strong words for commas, and I told him commas deserved advocacy. He smiled then, sudden and unguarded enough to make me quiet. "May I kiss you?" he asked. I said yes. His hand touched my waist only after I guided it there. The faucet dripped once behind us. A scooter rattled past outside. Nothing about the moment could help him win a vote or help me survive a lawsuit. That was why it finally felt like ours. We signed the dissolution of the original agreement 2 days later in Attorney Choi's office. The medical trust remained irrevocable. The exit money released into an account only I controlled, and security became mine to reduce or end. The marriage registration remained because neither of us filed to end it, and Attorney Choi made sure everyone understood the difference. "You are now legally married without coercive dependency," she said. "Emotionally, you are fools. That part is outside my jurisdiction." Sarah brought pastries to celebrate jurisdictional limits. Do-hyun arrived in workshop clothes and told Tae-hwan the conference table was too glossy for justice. Tae-hwan listened as if the complaint might require procurement review. Life afterward stayed uneven in ways that reassured me. I kept my apartment and my work. The West Suite in Tae-hwan's house became my editing room, though I replaced the formal desk lamp with a terrible green ceramic lamp Do-hyun made as a joke. Tae-hwan said it looked like a diseased frog. I said it was our first shared object. He never removed it. Sarah's smaller office grew by practical miracles. 2 clinic contracts, 1 labor group, a printer small enough to behave, and Hye-jin eating snacks behind a curtain instead of crying in a storage room. My mother recovered enough to call Tae-hwan the quiet, tall one, and criticize the thickness of the pears he cut for her. Moo-jin sent 1 letter from abroad about moving forward. Attorney Choi answered with 6 pages explaining why he should move forward silently. Tae-hwan and I disagreed often. He still overplanned. I still underreported stress until it escaped through sarcasm. He bought too many security devices. I labeled them with duck stickers until he reduced the number out of self-defense. We kept rules because love without habits is only a mood. No hidden threats, no protective lies, no public gestures used to avoid private apologies, no letting gratitude impersonate devotion. On the first anniversary of the scandal, an old article resurfaced with my face cropped beside his under the phrase, "hidden lover." I found it while eating toast before work. For a moment, the old shame stirred. Then, Tae-hwan reached across my little table and turned the phone face down. "Don't read bad captions before breakfast," he said. "That is my line," I told him. "I revised it," he answered. The toast burned while we argued and the basil brushed the glass. He took the pan before smoke filled the room. I opened the window. The kettle clicked off behind us, and our shoulders touched in the small kitchen without either of us moving away.